now it's time to learn some more advanced skills in technology, which is Linux. Um, and Linux is an operating system, really. So it's kind of like Windows or Mac, like it's towards that area. It's not something like crazy, just off the charts. Like, what is Linux? And we're going to talk a little bit more about what is Linux, where do you find it. I'm actually going to share my screen here on this side. Cool. And my background in technology was in high school. I actually learned a lot about security, cybersecurity, and I got a bunch of certifications back then too, which I got my like A plus, Network plus, Server plus, Security plus, and RHCSA back then. And then I kind of fell out of technology. When I graduated from high school, I was still young. I was nervous about going into the workforce and kind of about the interview process. Like I was nervous that they were just going to say, no, you're too young or you don't have enough experience. So I was super nervous about that. And I kind of steered off of that path that I was on. But then I looked back and I was like, what was my goal in life? What did I really want to do? And that's when I thought, I used to love Linux. I used to love doing it. And I know that since I lost a lot of that knowledge and skills from, my past, because it was already several years already since I graduated, what was that first step that I took to get into technology? And that first step for me was, and for everybody really, is networking. Like that's the first base knowledge that you should have is networking, or, A plus two, like actual devices that you work with. But nowadays, we work with these devices a lot, and it's more just learning about the networking and how they interact with each other, which you do learn from this course firstly. So that's what I looked into, the OCA or the CCA. And I said, well, which program starts with networking? Because I know that that would be a really good base knowledge for me. And I was scared to just jump straight into cybersecurity. So I went and I was like, you know what? This one actually starts with networking and it goes into Linux. This is perfect. Just exactly for me because I love Linux and I knew that it was going to be a great fit. So I came into the course and I started learning networking and it was all just coming back to me and it was amazing. And I had a really fun time in the course. I got to meet other people and have like study groups and talk about Linux things and networking things. And then we got to really network as well because, some of the people in the course, they may know others that are in technology and have jobs in technology and can get others into those jobs or maybe hear about other jobs that are hiring right now. So everybody just works together to get that end goal, which is that Linux job or, a system administration job, kind of what we're looking towards. So um, when I got into the course, I got my RHCSA and then I got my Linux Plus after that when I got hired on with Codeup as a graduate fellow back in April, I think. So, and then I started working towards my Linux Plus so that way I can instruct the Linux Plus course. And that's where I'm at today. And let's see the next slide here. So we're going to talk about what is Linux. And Linux is an open source operating system. So that kind of makes it different from Windows or Mac. So Windows would have a license where you would have to buy the operating system, but Linux is totally free. So you can download any operating system from Linux. And there's also another difference. So Windows, it's just Windows, right? There's Windows 10, Windows 11, there's a MacBook Pro, and it's the same operating system. But in Linux, there's so many different distributions of it. So if you say Linux, well, the next question is, well, what Linux are you running? Is it a Debian? Is it a Red Hat? It's like, well, wait. Let me take a look because I thought I just downloaded Linux. So there's so many different ones that you can download and try out. So in the class and in real life too, it's a really good for you to get a virtual box or a virtual machine. That way, when you install Linux, you can mess around with all the different distributions of it and play around with that. So open source is where the operating system can be created, modified, or viewed the source code. It can be viewed by anyone, but a lot of developers like to view it, and that's why we get a lot of these different distributions, because developers will take, let's say, one operating system like Ubuntu and say, I really like it, but I wish it just had this one other thing to it. So they'll take that source code and they'll add that one other thing to it and say, you know what, I want it to be called Pop OS or something totally different. Then they can call it that and release it. So then other people can download it and say, you know what, that's an awesome idea. I'm so glad that they added that, but I really wish they would have took this off too. And then they take it and same thing, they just keep developing on it. So that's why it creates these all these distributions, because everyone can just take it, modify it, they could copy it because it's an open source code. So they're able to create their own operating system from it. Whereas in like Windows, you just have Windows and that's it. You call it a day. You don't really modify it or do anything to make your own version of it. It's just what you get out of the box. That's pretty much it. And the same thing with like Mac OS. They don't have an open source either, so um, it's just what you get from them. And if you want to learn more about like the history of Linux, a really good movie, it's a documentary to watch, is called Revolution OS. And that gives you the whole history of Linux and, who created it and just the back end of it. And I found it really interesting to watch and learn about. It was a little boring at first, I'll admit that. But if you keep watching, it's like, whoa, that's crazy. That's amazing how they made it. So just keep watching it and you'll really enjoy it and learn more about it. Yeah. So where is Linux? Like a lot of people say, well, okay, you know, if nobody really has it, everyone's using Windows or Mac or Android or Android is Linux. So that's another thing. So mobile devices is where you'll find Linux for sure, because if you have an Android, that's running on Linux. Same thing with Apple. It's also um, a version of Linux, but it's not, it's a different license. You'll also find Linux in factories or your TV, like your Roku TV servers, like web servers. They usually run on Linux as well. And the reason they run on Linux and not Windows, don't get me wrong though, some servers, web servers, and other kinds of servers do run on Windows, but it's better to not run it on Windows because they don't use as much resources. So if they don't have a graphical and they just use the terminal where you're just typing and you don't see anything where you can point and click, then it's easier to have less resources. So it's just running the web server and that's pretty much what it's doing. Um, so you can find Linux really everywhere. It's everywhere that you may not even have thought about. It's also used in government, and the government's actually starting to use it more as well because it's doesn't have as many viruses, since a lot of people don't use it as much. But yeah, Linux is found everywhere. Oh no, I totally took it off. That's okay. Green slide. All right. So the next slide was Linux distributions. I don't know why my computer's going so slow. So Linux distributions. So there's two kinds of Linux distributions. One is Debian based and the other one is Red Hat based. So the Debian based uses they're kind of very similar. However, the Red Hat based is more enterprise. So a lot of bigger companies use it. You'll find those more being used as servers to host a website. Debian based is more used like at your house. You'll use it as a desktop, but not too much as like a server for enterprise level. And some of those are Ubuntu, Mint, Pop OS. Pop OS is actually a Linux distribution that was geared more towards gaming. So I haven't quite got it yet to, have all the gamers go to Pop OS, but because it doesn't play some games still that can be played on Windows. But they're trying to go towards, being able to have people game on Pop OS. And then Red Hat based, well, Red Hat's one of the ones that are really huge to be used on enterprise servers, but so is CentOS and Fedora. So CentOS is actually being deprecated. So it's by the end of this year, I think December 31st is the last time that they're supporting CentOS. And then after that, they're moving towards Rocky. So CentOS was owned by Red Hat now. It wasn't owned by Red Hat previously, but they purchased CentOS so that way they can use it under their name. And now that it's being deprecated, uh, the maker of CentOS just released a new one called Rocky. They use the same thing from CentOS and just put a different name on it. Since it's open source, they can copy and just change the name because, so Red Hat just paid them and, they still made another one. It's called Rocky and released it. But there's so much more. There's way more than this. This is just a little bit of what you can get and try out. But I would suggest, you could definitely try out all these different ones here. It's going to be very awesome when you look at it. And I'm actually going to show you the CentOS one today and possibly Ubuntu, but mainly CentOS I'll show you guys today and show you kind of how it looks compared to other distributions. So I'm going to go ahead and show y'all a list that I have here. Let me escape. And in this website, sorry, this bar is at the top. Okay, so right here, if you just Google Linux distribution list, you can actually find it on Wikipedia right there. And right here to the very right, there's this really long picture and it's like a timeline. So if you click it, you can actually zoom in like that. And it shows you all of the Linux distributions, when they were released. Up here at the top, there's a timeline, where they are derived from. So like Slackware, there's many different ones that come from Slackware. But we were talking like about Debian. So over here, if we go a little bit this way, you can see all the different distributions. These are all the different names that you can get. So there's Pure OS, Boss, Pelican, Tails. There's a whole bunch of different ones. And Ubuntu is here somewhere. It's on there, but it's just so hard to see now because there's so many different ones that you can get. And if you go back over here, I'm just going to slide it to the other side. You keep scrolling down. There is, I think this one, Red Hat. So from Red Hat, there's all of these different ones as well that derive from Red Hat. And like right here is CentOS. And if you keep going this way, there's just a whole bunch of different ones. And it also shows where they dropped off, like they finished, took them off. Yeah, this is a really cool picture I love to look at because you can really just see like all the different ones that there is. And there's like so many to look at. But yeah, I just want to show you guys this. So if you ever do want to look at it, like, you know what, I just want to try something random today. Then just look at one of these and choose one and put it on a virtual machine, you can. And yeah. So now we're going to get into a little bit about Linux. So I'm going to show you guys right here my virtual box. And I actually have right here a whole bunch of them that I use. So I've tried out like the Red Hat environment. I have CentOS, I have Rancher OS, I have Fedora, Ubuntu, Pop OS, and these are just some of these we use in class. Some of these were just for fun that I was trying out. Yeah, so right here I'm going to show you CentOS, and I click enter here. I'm going to type in my password. So you can see it's just like a normal operating system. And if you click right here, it has Firefox, it has your files. So I'll click on files right there. And I could see like a documents folder, a downloads folder, music, pictures, videos. It's like the same thing that you would see on a normal, computer that you would have at home. Um, so you can also do adding users too. So if I were to go here and go to my settings, and I just clicked up here at the top, it shows my sound, it shows my user. I can switch my user, I can just log out, you can look at my settings. Right here actually shows a little settings button. So I'm just going to click that. And I'm going to make my screen just a little bigger for you guys to see as well. Okay. So down here, you can see the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, all of the different things that you can connect to, sound, your power, and yeah, there's like a same thing as you were to see on a normal operating system because it is a normal operating system. The only difference is if you were to go to like a company that they have their web server hosted on a Linux server, you probably wouldn't see this. So you probably would not see the graphical interface. You would most likely be seeing just the terminal. And when I say terminal, there's this little right here, this terminal. When you click on it, it's just this box, and you would probably just be seeing this, where it shows your username, your host name, and then your location that you are on the server. So right now I'm in my home directory, and this is what I would be seeing if I were just on, if they didn't have a graphical and they didn't have where I can point and click on activities or, see my settings. This is all I would have. So what you're really going to be learning in the class is how to use this. And that's what we show you guys is how to use a terminal, um, show you all the different things that you can do with the terminal. You can do everything and more than what you can do in just a graphical. So if I were to want to create a user, I can do that in the terminal. I don't have to go to my settings, click on users, and then click add user like you would in like Windows or anything. Um, so here you would be able to see everything that you could. So one command that we can run is ls, which just lists um, my documents or my directory and my files. And everything in Linux is a file. So I'm going to do ls right here. And I could see my desktop, my downloads, my documents, my pictures, kind of like what I showed you guys when I went to activities and I went to my files. You see here documents, desktop, all of this is what I'm seeing in my terminal. So I can do the same things that I would do in a graphical. It's just right here with one command. I just type 2 letters instead of going to activities, clicking on that. Um, you could still do any of that in here. And that's really the fun of Linux is I love to type a lot. So I think this is a really fun thing to do. And knowing that I could do a whole bunch than just, having to search for a term to find it in my settings, I could just do it in here with a couple commands. So that's one of them. I'm going to show you guys a website that you could actually use to practice some Linux on. So over here, I can send y'all a link to this website called belar.org JS Linux, and I'll put it in the chat. Let me move this that way. And I put that in the chat right here, so that way you guys can take a look. And this is not a permanent server, so once you exit out of the website, it doesn't save anything that you created. So if you're just wanting to mess around and you create a file in there, it's not going to save your files. So you won't be able to create a whole bunch of files and exit and come back to the website and still see your files there. It just deletes them. But in this website, I like to click on the Fedora one because this is like a Red Hat distribution. So there's when you're using Red Hat and Debian, the commands are pretty much the same, but they do differ. So there are some commands that are run differently than they are on a Red Hat distribution. But it's like a language, if you know, it's kind of like an accent. So if I am speaking, I have like a Texan accent, I guess, or to go like New York, they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We say things a little, that could mean a little different over here, but you know, it's just how you say it in Texas. It's kind of like in Red Hat, I say things a certain way, and then I go to Ubuntu and I'm trying to type it that way, and it's like, whoa, 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 we're not really understanding what you're talking about here. Can you say it a different way? It's like, okay, cool. It's the other way around, and it'll understand that. But I'm going to be using Fedora, and I'm just going to hit click here under the startup link. And when I click that, it'll say loading. So it's just loading up the server. And this is just going to show you a terminal. It's not going to show you the graphical, so you won't be able to see where you can just point and click on your files or directories. You're going to have to do it all in here. So this is a really good practice utility if you're just trying to see like, well, do I like Linux? I want to try a couple commands first. You can definitely do that in here and just practice around getting around Linux, getting to different files, looking at your different files. So in the other one that I showed you guys right here, I just want to point out something. So on this one, you see that it says Vagrant. This is my user that I'm logged into. And this one says root. So root is actually the highest user you can ever be. So if I were to just create my user Vagrant or, create a user named Sabrina, then it would have no administrative privileges. So I wouldn't be able to do certain things that only an admin can do unless I gave it privileges to do so. So if I gave this user Vagrant privileges to be an admin, they're able to do certain things in there. However, they're not able to do, they can do everything that root can do, but you'd have to say please. You have to say, please, can I do this? And that would be the sudo command. So I would run sudo to say, I'm going to use administrative privileges. But root doesn't have to do that. They just say, I want to remove this file. Okay, yes, I will remove it right away. It's just not going to ask any questions. It's just going to say, yes, okay, I'm going to remove whatever you say, it will do. So if you're the root user, you can totally destroy your machine. So you have to be very careful when you're being the root user. It's best practice not to be the root user, actually. So if you just don't know the root password, that's best practice. So the best thing to do is just to have a user that has administrative privileges and just to run the sudo command if you want to remove a file. So if I wanted to remove file 1, I would just run my sudo command and remove the file. So there's the command to remove a file would just be rm for remove. And I would do file 1 because that's what my file is called. If I hit enter, it'll do it. So it didn't say anything because I use these sudo privileges. So if I were to do ls one more time, you can see that my file 1 that was right here is gone. It's no longer there because I removed it. And a lot of the commands in Linux are very similar to the word you would say, I guess, to do something. So like remove is just rm. So it'll be a little easy to remember rm as remove. And then if I'm adding a user, it would be user add. That would be the command for that. If I wanted to switch to a different folder or directory, I would do cd to change directory. So a lot of the commands are very similar to what you would say to do the task. And it's easy to relate them to something you would do. So that's how I memorize them is like if I'm copying something, the command to copy a file would be cp for copy. Okay, so over here, we'll head back over here. As you notice in the other one, it also said CentOS, and this one says localhost. So this is my host name for this server, which is they just put localhost. And this is where I am located. So like I said in the other one, I was located in my home directory. This is actually what the symbol means. So that little symbol is called a tilde, and it means your home directory. So if I do ls here as well, I don't think there's really much in here because it's not a server that's has anything on it. You would have to create your own files or folders to do that. But right here, you can mess around with it. So if I wanted to create a file or, remove a file like this hello.c, you could do the same thing, just rm hello.c. Now, if you notice on this one, I'm not putting sudo because I'm already root. So if I were to do rm hello.c, again, it does not tell me anything. It just does it. So if I do ls, you can see it's gone. It just removed whatever I said. And I do want to show you real quick before I forget. I have this file in my directory called new file one. I want to show you how it would be if I were to just not use sudo. So if I do rm new file one and hit enter. Oh wait, it doesn't tell me. I guess because I own it. So if I were to not own this file, it would say, "Are you sure you want to remove this file?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do." But usually it'll ask you. It'll say, "Do you want to remove this?" And you're like, "Yeah, I do." But if you do sudo, it won't ask you at all. So dash I. So if you were to do rm dash I, it should ask me. So we'll do listing.txt. There we go. So I use the option dash I, and you can also see all your options in here. So if you're like, well, I know the command, but I don't know any of the options. I have no idea. I've never touched Linux before. I don't know any of the options. I just know I learned a couple commands in the workshop, and that's all. So I'll show you guys how to get help in Linux too. And that's a really huge thing because, I don't want to memorize any options. I really don't. It's hard for me to memorize options. I want to be able to say, if I'm in my job and I'm trying to remove something and like, well, he wanted to ask me, I would have to look at my options. So I'm going to hit yes to this, and to do yes, I'm just going to hit Y. Now to get help in Linux, I would do, let's say rm dash dash help, and I'm just asking it for help, and it just spits out a whole bunch on my screen, right? But if I were to scroll up here, I'm just scrolling with my mouse, back to my command that I ran, which is rm dash dash help, it tells me how do I use the command. So it says usage, you would just do rm, your options, and then your file. Now, it has a whole bunch of options right here that I can use, and it tells you what each of the options mean. So this one is one that we use, which is dash I, and it says prompt before every removal. So that's why it prompted us if we wanted to remove the file before we did. So these are ways that you can get help in Linux. If you had no idea, how to form a command or anything like that, you can get help by just doing dash dash help with the command itself. You could also do man and then the command name. So man stands for manual. So if you get like a manual when you're, I don't know, building a desk or something, you get like a little manual that tells you your steps to do, or it tells you what each thing does. Uh, you're able to look at that. So we'll do man rm because that's the command that we're doing, is remove. I hit enter. Right here, it tells me the name of the command, which is rm, and it tells me what it does. So it says removes files or directories. Now it says directories, but directories are also like folders. So if you want to think of it as a folder, that's what it is. And then files are just files. And it gives you the same thing right here, how it's used, rm, option, file. In Linux, the proper syntax for every command is command, options, and then the argument. And that would be the syntax in Linux. And it gives you the description on what this manual is, same thing with what it does. And then it gives you the options again right here. And you can scroll down. and it tells you who wrote this manual, um, and all of those. Some other things that are related to this command as well that you can look up those manuals. And some of the man pages actually shows an example, like it'll say examples, and then it'll show you some examples on how to use the command. I know this one shows right here some examples, but some will actually say example, and it'll show you a couple examples of how to use the command. And to get out of this man page, I'm just going to hit Q to quit, and it tells me right down here, press H for help or Q to quit. I don't want to be in here anymore, so I'm just going to hit Q, and it takes me out of there, and it takes me right back to my my screen. So in this course, we're going to teach you guys how to get around Linux, how to just move around to different files, to different directories, how to remove stuff, and then some more advanced things too that you need to do in Linux, and in really every computer, but how to do it in Linux. So on this page, if you guys do want to practice a little bit on running some of those commands, you can do all of that here as well. And I'm going to show you guys a document, not a document, sorry, a website that'll help you learn just a little bit of the basics of Linux as well. So I'm going to share this in chat. This is called linuxjourney.com, and I did find this. I think a past class a student had shared this with me, and so that they had used it to get some more resources that they can use. And I found it very helpful. You don't have to sign up for anything unless you want to get updates about new courses and lessons. But other than that, you don't have to sign up at all. You can just go to the website, and it shows all these different modules, I guess you would call it. And as you get lower right here on like Journeyman, it starts getting a little more complicated, a little more advanced. And then same thing right here, it's a little more advanced. And this one says Networking Nomad. So this deals a lot with networking, which is a little different in Linux. So when we have the networking portion in the beginning of the course, it teaches you the foundation of networking and how it works. So you have a better understanding when you come into this course of, you know, what DNS does or how routing works. But when you come in here, you'll learn some commands on how to configure some of this stuff for networking. So up here, this is probably where you all want to get started, is right there. So if you click that, it actually shows the history of Linux. So it tells you a little bit more about the history, and I think Linus, Richard Stallman and Linus, I can't remember his last name. There it is. Torvalds, who developed the Linux kernel. So it also tells you how to choose a distribution. When you're choosing one, you know, what you have to take into account for, like your hardware, how much space you need. And then it shows you some of the different ones like Debian and Red Hat, which we kind of talked about the difference of those. So Ubuntu would be a Debian distribution. Red Hat would be Red Hat. CentOS would be Red Hat. And it just shows you, you know, what package manager they use. So in Red Hat, they use a different package manager than Ubuntu would. So you can just go through these and learn a little bit more about that. And it also has some exercises right here that you could do. Some of these exercises aren't just here, do this in your terminal. Some of them are actually telling you to read certain topics. So if I go to history, it says additional reading, and you can click any of these links to read a little bit more about these people or this license. But there are some that have you sorry, let me close it out, that have you do actual exercises. So if I go here to like command line, it tells you to try some of these exercises, which we can try. So we'll try some of these commands, which is date and who am I. And if you notice right in front, there's a little $sign. This is actually not a part of the command. So you shouldn't run the $sign date. You shouldn't run that. It should just be date. Now, the reason there's a $sign in front of it is because if I take you back over here to my command line, The one that does not say root, it just says vagrant, has a $sign. This means I am not the root user. So if there was a user that you were just playing around in Linux for funsies and you're like, what if I create a user called root? Would I have root access? If you for some reason did that, I don't know why somebody would, but if you did create a user called root and you looked right here, it would still have a $sign because you're not actually root. You're just a user on the system having some fun. But if you were root, it would have a hash mark. So if we go back here to this terminal, you notice right here that this has a hash mark. This means that you are the root user. So that's how you know, am I root or am I just a user on the system? Even if I were to use sudo, to get some administrative privileges to run a command, it still wouldn't show this hash mark. This is only if I'm the root user. Okay. So that's why it's showing you just a $sign right here, just to know that you're just a user. You don't have to be root to run this. And you could just run like the date command. So we'll run the date command on this one online. So I'm just going to type date and I'm just going to hit enter. Now, when I do that, it just shows me the date. So it shows me today's date. The day of today, the date, the time, what time it's looking at. So it's looking at UTC, I think it's Central Time, and then the year, which is 2021. There are many different options for date as well. So for every command, there's going to be a whole bunch of options that you could do with them as well. So that's why we don't say to ever memorize any options, because you can always just look them up. So if I were to do date -- help, and it's going to, flood my screen with stuff. So I'll leave that on there just for a second. And when I do this command, you're going to see a few options that you can run with it to maybe form this line how you want. So if I wanted to just see, the date and that was it, you can do a couple options to just show the date. Or if I wanted to put it in a different format, a different way to show on here, you can do that as well. So when I click enter, it shows me some different options. So right here, there's all these different options that you could run. There's so many with the date command to run with this. So there's a whole bunch of options there that you can run. And again, up here, it'll show you how to use it. So usage would be date, option, and then the format. Okay. Now the other one it tells us to run is who am I? So just reading the command, it'll tell you who you are. So if I run it on this one, it should tell me root because that's who I am. Now I don't really run this command because you could, just see who you are right there. But if you did want to know, you could do who am I, hit enter, and it just says root. Now, if I were to do it on this virtual machine, the one that says vagrant, if I were to run who am I, it should say vagrant right there. So it just tells you who you are on the server. So back to here, it tells you to run these couple of exercises. It explains what the shell is. It also has a little quiz here that says what would be outputted if you do echo hello world. So you'll just type in your answer here and then hit check answer. So echo is a command that will display whatever you type. So if I were to type echo hello world, it'll say hello world, or anything that I really type. So go back here and go there. For some reason, it doesn't click it. Okay. So right here, if I were to do echo hello world, not the best typer today. So echo hello world, it'll just display hello world. And right now you could say, why would anybody ever use that command? Like it's not like, why would I want to see what I'm writing? And I thought the exact same thing. I was like, why would I want to see, what I write? But as I went through the course, everything comes full circle. It's like, oh, I see what I need, why I need to learn all these commands. So when you start doing some bash scripting, this command becomes very useful. You're going to be using this command a lot in bash scripting, as well as some other commands that you normally use. So right now, as this command might seem a little bit useless, when you start learning some bash scripting, it becomes very helpful and very useful that you're going to need to know that command. So going back here to the Linux journey, this one, if you were to just type hello world, and I already had it in my answers there, but if you were to just type hello world and hit check answer, it would just say correct answer. The only downfall that I see of this website is if you were to type like a wrong answer, like let's see that one, it just says not quite, try again. So it doesn't tell you what the correct answer is or any hints or anything. But the good thing is though that a lot of these answers are just in the reading. So as long as you just read this up a little bit, you can definitely get that correct answer there. And there's so many different things to look at. And this is just in this one module called command line. It gives you all these different commands that you can run. So we did learn a little bit about RM today. Told you the CP command means to copy. I showed ls, which is to list directories, or you could think of directories as folders. And of course, there's so many options. So you can do a whole bunch of different options with ls on manipulating your output. Okay. So this website is very useful when you're on your Linux journey, I guess you would say. So I really like the title of it too. It fits very well with what we're trying to do. So I do recommend that as a really good resource, at least to start your Linux journey off. So if you want to start, learning a little bit more about Linux, definitely take a look at that website and read through some of those stuff. If you do find yourself in a little bit of trouble, some things are a little tough to understand, you can always YouTube some stuff or come to the course. We'll help you out with that too. And we use some CompTIA resources in the course. We use these virtual machines, so we'll teach you a little bit about how to use VirtualBox, and how to bring up these machines. So that way you can mess around a little bit with Linux. But if you did want to bring up one of these machines on your own, you can, Google Oracle VirtualBox and maybe like how to use Vagrant, which is what we're using here. And it'll tell you a little bit more about that. It is a little tough to do, but we do have like a README file that we do provide the students with as well. So yeah, and over here, we can take a little bit more of a look. So there's one command that I do want to show y'all, which is touch. And this one updates the timestamp of files, but it also creates files. Now, you can't really edit with this command. So to edit a file is a totally different story. It's a huge lesson. But to create a file that you can just see show up on your thing, you can do touch. So if I did want to create a file, I can just run touch, and I wanted to create, I don't know, new file, we'll call it. So touch new file. Now, if I were to run the ls command one more time, I can see that my new file is right there, ready to go. So to edit that file there's a few different applications that different commands that you could use. If you are using the graphical, you could edit the file through the graphical as well. So like right here, if I were to do the same thing, touch new file, like that, do ls, and it's right here, new file. So if I were to go to activities, go back to my folders right here, I can see my new file is right there. Now, when I open it, there's going to be nothing in it. There should be absolutely nothing because all we did was touch it. We just created one, but there should be absolutely nothing in there. And this takes a little bit to load, but when it gets there. So when it opens up in this graphical editor. This graphical editor is called gedit. So it's I don't know, you could say gedit or gedit. I used to say gedit, but now I know to say gedit. And then you can type in your file. So I can say, hello, this is my new file. And this is not with the command line. This is just using the graphical. So I'm not able to do it on this side because this is just the terminal. I hit save. It'll save my file. And then over here, I think it actually shows you how to edit some files with the command. I think it's going to be like over here. Maybe not. I think they teach it, but there's a whole bunch of commands that they have in this website that you can learn from. So there's, oh yeah, it does. So right here, it talks about some text editors that you could use. So it talks about Vim and Emacs. One of the ones that you're definitely going to be using in your Linux journey is going to be Vim. So that's a really huge one that we use. And it does take a little bit of getting used to, but they do have a tutorial in the terminal as well on using it. And you can, of course, go through here to try and learn a little bit more about it. But it does take a little bit of getting used to, but it's super powerful and very easy to use, I feel, but as long as you start adapting to it. Yeah, you learn a lot in this course. So what I'm touching on is just a little bit of the basics of Linux, just like a high overview of some commands that you can use, at least just to get around Linux from now. But that's pretty much what we learn in the course. And just definitely use this if you have a chance to, maybe if you already are getting enrolled in the course, take a look at this and it'll help you uh, try and recognize some of those things. So when you do come to the Linux portion of the course, it's a little easier and you're more familiar with some of the commands that we're going to run in this portion. But yeah, is there any questions that you guys have?